When you're in winter's favorite town, the snow-covered mountains surround you. A historic Main Street charms you. And every day brings a new adventure. Welcome to Park City, Utah. Naturally, winter's favorite town. Join the experience at visitparkcity.com.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds.
Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous two-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month.
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
Productivity, winning strategies, and aligning employer-employee goals. If this sounds like something your business could use more of, then you've come to the right place. The Business Mechanic Show with your host, Vaughn Sigmund. Let Vaughn show you how to develop, improve, and jumpstart your business. So now, please welcome the host of The Business Mechanic, Vaughn Sigmund.
So today we're going to be talking about mastering difficult conversations. I posted this on all the different sites that probably all of you found this on as don't tiptoe around difficult conversations. In my 40 years of working in a leadership role, I have found over and over, this is a very popular topic because of the discomfort and the challenge that many people in leadership have with having conversations that sometimes can be perceived as difficult. And we're going to talk about a little of those psychological elements of it today. But most importantly, I'm going to lay out a roadmap, a structure, a bit of an architecture, and most importantly, some mindsets, hopefully to change some minds, how you think about having these conversations, and give you some tips on how to approach these in a way that overcomes any fear of a conversation going sideways on you. That is the purpose for today, but let's get into it. First of all, let me introduce myself. I'm Vaughn Sigmund. I'm the co-founder of Results Driven Leadership. I've been doing this for about 10 years. I've been in leadership for going on 50 years now, but my expertise, everything I share in all my books, all of my blogs, all of my podcasts, all of my videos, everything comes from years and years of frontline experience. I never went to MBA school. Everything I share is frontline, real world stuff. I don't talk about theory. I'm a former CarMax executive, which CarMax is very proud, and to this day, for going on 30 years now, has been a Fortune 100 best places to work. I learned a lot from working in one of those environments. And a lot of what I learned, again, from working in that environment, I share with my audience, my clients, my students, and all the different things we do. At the end of the day, my mission is to improve the knowledge, skills, and tools that executives, managers, business owners have to give them the ability to have a more positive and higher impact on their organizations. I've always approached my business and throughout my entire career with the motto that no matter what business we're in the people business. And I found if you can become skilled and knowledgeable and confident at that aspect of the business, a lot of things fall into place and life and your career become much easier. Now, much of what is contained today is in my book, which is available for free on Amazon. We're going to send you a link. My fantastic executive assistant, Ashley, is attending today. She will send everybody links to everything I talk about today, along with a couple tools. But this is all available to you. We'll give you a link to go download this tool for absolutely free after this webinar. Hopefully you will find some value out of that, but a lot of people have. And my mission today is to help introduce you to how to deal with underperforming employees, maybe disagreeing with your your spouse at home or a significant other, negotiating with a difficult customer. These are all kinds of conversations that we tend to avoid, procrastinate, and maybe passively aggressively approach. I have found that that is not a beneficial way of dealing with these situations, because your emotions, your thoughts, the situation continues to build and build, and internally we start boiling, and it builds and it builds, and we end up maybe saying things or behaving in ways that is not beneficial to us, but all this emotion is built up in us. Or we're not dealing with the situation, and the situation will never get better unless we address it. But most people don't address it because they just don't know how. And again, my mission today with everybody that's attended, and I appreciate so much all the folks that have taken the time out of their busy schedules to join me today on this. My mission today is to give you some confidence. This takes practice. This takes you applying it, putting your foot out there, going after it. And listen, if it's something you're avoiding frequently, the first time you do it, you're going to be better using some of the techniques I share today, but you will not be perfect. You must keep practicing it. That's one of the reasons why I want to give you the book. I want to give you some other tools that come along with this. And as you practice it, you'll, like we do with anything in life, you'll keep getting better and more confident at it. Again, I had to learn how to do it. I was fortunate enough to learn how to have these conversations at a very early stage in my career. And I found how much it benefited me in just moving forward, getting things accomplished, letting people know where they stood. And most importantly, I didn't carry around the burden of that emotion of not dealing with the situation, because once again, it rarely ever fixes itself. So everything I want to share with you today has been utilized by me and many of the people I work with, my clients and my students, for over 20 years. I've trained hundreds of people on this, and I'm honored to give you all an overview of this today. So let's move a little bit further into this. Let's talk about what a difficult conversation is. It's anything you find hard or difficult due to fear of some negative outcome or consequence from it. Fear can be also turned into an acronym, FEAR, false expectations appearing real. Very often it's a self-limiting mindset that we place on ourselves, that we hold back saying what we need to say or having the conversation we need to have with somebody because of fear. We have already predetermined what that outcome is going to be. And because of human nature, we typically believe it's going to be a negative or a difficult outcome. So that keeps us bottled up. It keeps us passive. It keeps us procrastinating, kicking the can down the road on having these conversations. And you're not helping yourself nor any of the other parties involved that need to be involved in this conversation. This is a key element to your leadership skill. This is a very important part of the skills that you must have in your toolbox in order to be a highly effective leader, is having these difficult conversations. And I think as you practice some of the techniques I'll share with you today, you'll find that what you perceive today as potentially a difficult conversation becomes a much easier conversation as you build your knowledge and confidence around this. Because the dilemma we always face is we either avoid it or we confront it. We've got two choices. It's either fight or flight, right? And we will either delay or procrastinate what we fear. And as I mentioned earlier, our feelings will fester. Most importantly, we will rob everybody involved in whatever situation we need to talk about of any potential successful resolution. Whatever is happening will continue to live on, and the progress or advancement is unlikely to change unless we put ourselves into a situation of somewhat of discomfort and deal with it. But again, most people don't deal with it because they're not real sure how to. We also worry about confronting the problem, and things getting worse. I can assure you that having done this for decades, having these types of conversations using the structure I'm going to share with you today, I can count on 2 or 3 fingers how many times the problem ever got worse. After having hundreds and hundreds of these conversations, because I was placed in a role that I very often had to have difficult conversations. It was either a performance issue, a planning issue, a disagreement between people issue, a disagreement I had with somebody else, either my boss or a peer or a direct report. We had to deal with it because we couldn't move forward without it. And I'm telling you, I cannot remember 2 or 3 times in decades that things ever got worse. They always got better. But to gain confidence, it starts with you changing your mindset first. We have to open ourselves up, have a little bit of a paradigm shift, because the problem isn't in your actions. It's in your thinking, what's preventing you from taking the actions. Our self-esteem, our predetermined outcomes are very powerful parts of our psyche, and that's what you're fighting. And what you're really fighting, the true reason behind all this, is the catastrophic mindset. Now, I'm no psychologist. I'm an armchair psychologist. I've been a study of people my entire life since I started running for office in elementary school. But it's back again. This catastrophic mindset tends to send us to what we perceive as going to be a negative outcome, back to false expectations appearing real. In order to change your mindset, to be able to give you the gumption to go have more of these very positive conversations that sometimes we're avoiding, we have to shift our stance in a very subtle way, but it's the game changer. We have to shift from I have to give a message stance to I have to learn. I need to find out more information stance. And that alone is the biggest shift any of you attending this webinar today are going to have to make. Don't worry about going in and having a dialogue and telling something to someone that you may or may not be comfortable with. What's going to make you comfortable is going into these conversations with, I need to learn more. I need to find out more information. I need to find out their story. I need to be able to compare that to the story I have. And as you all know, somewhere in the middle is the true story. And then we need to think about what we need to do, what we can do. Most importantly, we need to change something that must be altered. And that's our role. We can't avoid that as leaders. We have to go in and get ourselves involved in it. What we can change is the way we respond to these challenges. And again, back to that subtle mind shift is I'm not going to go into a conversation with a pre-scripted approach of what I'm going to say. I'm going to go in with some questions. I must ask questions. And I'm telling you, that changes the game for you. Because as we explore the situation, we gain more information through starting with questioning. And all of a sudden, you're going to get a much clearer picture of what happened. There's also a psychology behind that is one of our deepest needs as a human is to be listened to. That really opens us up to trust and dialogue when we're listened to. And what we're going to do is we're going to shift the tables here. We're going to listen to them before they listen to us. Don't assume you have all the information. That's right there what gets people in trouble, is not having all the information. It's a lack of confidence that I know what's going on, or too much confidence based on too little information. And it has been wondrous with people who apply these techniques. If you go in with an open mindset, I'm going to go in with questions. I'm going to give you a list of, I think it's 25 open-ended questions at the end of this webinar. Ashley's going to email all those to you. You start using those as part of these conversations, and it's going to be the difference between night and day and how they go. Because what you're really looking for is the what happened conversation. What's the story here? Going back a couple of slides ago, we can't assume we have all the information. We don't know everything. So you first must understand the truth assumption and avoid it. Don't assume you have all the information. We often fail to ask the key questions because of these assumptions. And you're all guilty of this, including myself, is we're right. We have an approach and a mindset that I'm right, you're wrong, and I'm going to correct you. You can't approach it that way because you may be wrong. Most of the time you're going to be right, or you'll have most of the information. But back to that shift in mindset, if I go in with questions versus a monologue, the one-way conversation, we will run the risk of missing information and embarrassing ourselves because we were wrong, or approaching this conversation in a way that will never allow that person to share what we may be wrong about. They may be so intimidated or demoralized or disengaged or turned off based on how you're approaching it, that they'll never share how you're wrong. And what you've done is just broken the relationship we have with that individual. That's not something any leader ever desires, because that's very difficult, if not impossible, to repair. You think about any time you've ever been wrongly accused, even as a child, of something, and how much that hurts your feelings. We're dealing with feelings here. And there's many people, many DISC profiles. We use DISC extensively in our practice here, but there's certain DISC profiles. That feeling is the empathy that we need for others is not something we possess a lot of. Most leaders have a very high D, which lacks a lot of empathy in dealing with others. You have to fight that. Now, that's only about 3% of the population. I think I have one DISC of somebody that's on this call today, and it's one of my clients that's joining us today. Mike, I appreciate you joining. But you want to make sure you have all the information so you're not hurting feelings, you're not breaking relationship. And most importantly, this is the first step to getting to the bottom of it so that you can fix the situation. The big hitch is you're always right. You've got to abandon that thought, because difficult conversations cannot be approached with you thinking that you're always right. There's always conflicting perceptions. And sometimes we are fighting perceptions. It's not so black and white. Perceptions sometimes are very gray. And part of this, the role and the goal out of one of these conversations is to clarify things. We want to get things very clear, black and white, and focused. But in order to do that, we need to get all the information. And if we go in doing all the talking, we're never going to get all the information. It just doesn't work like that, because very often part of the reason why we think we're right, they're wrong, we have all the information, is we assume their intention. We assume somebody else's intention. I call it the intention invention. We come up with their intention. And you know what? You're not always right. That's the second little mindset that you have to make sure you ingrain in yourself. So I'm not right, and I cannot assume or think I know what their intention was. It's a very common error that we make. We assume we know why they did it. But the fact is, intentions are invisible. They only live in the mind or in the soul of the other party or parties that are involved in this conversation. And we're simply making them up. We're making our own stories up. And we may be right, but often we're wrong. And if we were in a class with a much smaller group than we have today, we'd go around the room today and say, tell me about a time you got it wrong, when you assumed you knew someone else's intention and you found out later that you were wrong. We've all, for the most part, been guilty of making that assumption. That avoidance of guilt might make these conversations difficult for us because we want to avoid putting ourselves in that situation again. Then we have to watch out for the blame frame, I call it. Another big error is we're focusing on placing blame for this mess. And you start going down that path and you're setting yourself up for a difficult procedure. Blame distracts us from really finding out what went wrong. You have to assume that nobody's right, nobody's wrong. I just need more information. I need to get the total truth out of this. And more importantly, without that or with that, we might or might not be able to correct the situation moving forward. We must get to the real causes of the problem, the challenge, the situation. Then and only then can we begin correcting it. Gathering all the information. I call it a pool of collective thought. Imagine a pond of thoughts. And the more thoughts, ideas, experiences, words that go into that pool of thought, the more likely I am to have as much information as possible to guide me to an improved outcome. It's called collaboration in many circles. So it's really important you temper yourselves, ask questions. They need to be open-ended questions. We're going to go into that a little bit later. But always remember, these difficult conversations at their core, always about feelings. I'm sure most of you have heard the saying, it's not what you say, but how you make somebody feel. We're dealing with emotions. We're all emotional beings. We all are possessed with a lot of feelings. Some are a little more armored than others, but we can't always judge that. We can only deal with ourselves. And sometimes when our feelings are a little worked up, we behave or approach things in a way that's not going to be appropriate. The way I'm going to share with you today, and I'm sharing with you today, is going to give you a much more appropriate approach to having a very positive outcome from a conversation. Always keep in mind when we walk out of the conversation that we all feel good, we're encouraged, we're positive about the next step. Now, caveat to that, there are certainly conversations that need to be one way. They need to be the final conversation, because I've had all these very good conversations with you in the past, and whoever's on the other end of this conversation has chosen not to make the appropriate alterations to their work, their behavior, achieving their goals, or what have you. They've made a choice after you've had enough of these proper conversations. Yes, that gives you permission to say, hey, listen, we've talked about this 2 times, 3 times, 4 times. There's no change in this. Here's what's going to happen. If you don't, something negative is going to come with you. We're probably going to have to send you down the road. Those rare conversations, yes, are going to happen. But very often, if you're having the kind of conversations I'm having or sharing with you today, you're less likely to ever get to that point, because you've given that other person the opportunity to get their feelings, their emotions, their encouragement, to maintain that level of trust that they have in you. And always remember, I've got to always get this in, is people work for people. They don't work for companies. Now, if you're the business owner, they still work for you. They don't work for the sign that's on the outside of the building. People work for people. And by the way, they leave bosses. You're in control of all this. You're in control of their retention, their productivity, the outcomes that they generate based on the trust and the encouragement, the motivation that you provide them because you listen to them, you trust them. In order to be trusted, we have to grant trust. And a very important way of granting trust to someone is to listen to them. Give them the opportunity to talk and share their thoughts, their ideas, so that you have all the information and don't make false assumptions. Now, let's talk about going into this conversation. I've talked about your mindset. Now we're sitting in front of somebody. Here's why the typical openings that maybe is the reason why you're attending this webinar today. Here's the typical opening that rarely, if ever, works. Because we begin with our own story. We have one story, our own story, and that's what we're beginning the conversation with. We describe the problem based on our story. And by doing so, we're going to trigger the emotions, the thoughts of the other person. And you know what happens when you trigger a negative thought or emotion in the person you're trying to make better? They stop listening. Now this conversation is a complete waste of everybody's time because they're not listening to you. In order for them to listen to you, you must listen to them first. That's the math. When we trigger them, we threaten them. And we all know that when we feel threatened, we're either going to lash out or we're going to shut down. And that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for a dialogue that we can collaborate and come out with a positive outcome from this conversation. Nobody benefits from anybody's failure. But if somebody's coming up short, yes, we have to have that conversation, but in a way that is most likely to change the course of their performance or the situation. By you in the beginning, starting with getting their story, with questions and curiosity, being open-minded. You've not predetermined the outcome of this. You've not predetermined your story. If you go in open-minded, and this is more difficult for some than others, that opens up this conversation to much more likely be a positive conversation. But you don't want to set up a win-lose scenario if you go in with the assumption everything. Fact is, rarely you do. And the collision, the wreck in all this comes is because their story is different from our story. And I say this often, it is rare, unless they're a psychopath, it is rare to find the employee that gets up every morning and says, you know what? I'm going to go to work today and I'm going to do as lousy a job as I possibly can. I'm going to be lazy. I'm going to be disruptive. I'm going to get away with as much as I possibly can. Pretty rare person. Most employees, the ones working with you now, they want to go do a good job every day. And if we sometimes run across these situations where they're not performing at levels or standards that we expect of them, we have to have the conversation. But we can't argue with them. Whether this is at home, it's with a child, it's with a significant other, it's with a spouse, it's with a friend. But certainly, if it's someone who's a direct report of ours, if you ever get into an argument, you're done. You're going to accomplish nothing. You're going to walk out frustrated. They're going to walk out frustrated, and nothing will have been accomplished from that. So you have to avoid the argument at all cost. And the best way to avoid that argument is to be open-minded, be resourceful with your questions, be truly curious and open-minded, seek understanding first. It's a book from many years ago. Seek first to understand in order to be understood. I believe that was Stephen Covey. I may be wrong in that quote, Seek first to understand so you can then be understood. That's the process here. Because once you fully understand, then you've opened their ears and you've opened their minds up to your side of the story, what you've learned. And sometimes there's been situations that I've completed asking the questions, uncovering their story, to where I say, never mind, I brought you in here for nothing. I was given bad information. And I'm sorry I wasted your time. That has happened. That's happened more than the outcome of this conversation going poorly. That I just went in half-cocked, but thank God I was having a constructive conversation through asking the right questions, and found out before I ever shut my mouth off and got myself in trouble and disengaged with this person, broke the trust with this individual or individuals, because I faced this in groups as well. The stories I could tell. I found out that I just did not have the information. So I just stopped having the conversation. I was much better off doing that, because we have different information. Almost always when there is a situation that we're having to deal with, it's because of a variance of information. We notice different things. Our views on what we notice are often based on differing information. Could be how goals were set, timelines were set, job structures were created. But the only person that knows ourselves better than ourselves is ourselves. We always have access to different information than someone else. But if we're getting it secondhand, always understand that's been turned into their perception of the situation. The other person has their perception of the situation. That's the intention invention that we have to avoid. And that's where these conversations can either go very well or go very poorly. So always assume that there is important information out there that you do not have. And if you approach any difficult situation with that mindset, you're winning the game. If you shift to a learning stance, shift to what happened stance, and stop struggling with right and wrong, who's right, who's wrong, explore the stories. That's what creates arguments, is when we're not listening to somebody else. And men on this webinar today, I'm sorry. I've got to inform you of something. We're not very good at listening. Have you ever had a female in your life say to you, "You never listened to me"? I can't see all the audience right now, but there's a few women that are nodding their heads and smiling right now, because it's just true. Men, we are wired and programmed from our core to listen to just enough information for us to build a response, a solution, and then share it. We have to fight our nature in these situations. We have to know that's our propensity to think we have everything to solve the problem. You have to hold that back. You have to hold that back. You have to explore the stories. You have to listen. You have to avoid the argument. They think we're the problem. We think they're the problem. Somewhere in the middle is where the problem lies. Because when we get into an argument, any kind of understanding is out the door. Because listening to stop. It inhibits change. And I've studied change management for many years now. The only way you can get anybody, whether it's an entire group of direct reports, employees, team members, whatever you call them in your organization, associates, staff members, whatever, and the only way you can get people to change a course of actions is you have to get their feelings on your side. And in this case where we've got a disagreement with somebody, we can avoid the disagreement by understanding their story first. And this is what differentiates an average manager from a great leader. It's commonly called soft skills. I included it in this presentation because that's what it's normally called. That's the catchphrase for it. But I really think it's not soft skills. It's essential skills. It's the essential skills we must possess to be able to deal with humans and the human feelings and psyche in a way that's going to give us the best productivity and outcomes. It also gives us a great deal more self-satisfaction and success. And you as a leader have to be able to develop the approach, the process to have a high level of trust through trusting communication. And I've done a podcast, I've done a video, I've written several blogs on this. The best leaders are the best listeners. You'll find that in all the top leaders, is they have either the natural skills, which is very rare, or they've trained themselves in the skills of keeping their mouth shut and their mind open until they have enough information to be able to perform an opinion. Great leaders lead with their ears. Utilizing that tool provides you with a much more positive relationship with your team. And that's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. And the big mistake is we don't listen. If we go in with the wrong mindset, we're just letting them talk and we're not absorbing what they're saying. We don't really hear what they're trying to say. If you're really tuned in with great active listening skills, you're really curious, you're open-minded, you really are in this conversation to get all the information you can, so you have a very clear black and white picture of what the situation truly is, what the root cause is. When you approach it with that mindset, you have to be able to actively listen. What's active listening mean? It means you're going to ask open-ended questions. One, who, what, when, where, how, cannot be answered with a yes or a no, simply, right? I think everybody on here knows that. But it also involves probing. Tell me more. Share more with me. How did that make you feel? What led to that? What came next? Draw out information, probe and listen. And I also personally, I make a lot of notes. I think that's important too. Like I mentioned earlier, Ashley, my very talented assistant, is going to send out to you a list, and I guessed right, it was 25 open-ended questions for you to have practice questions. You're going to have at least a beginning of what types of questions. This isn't the essential list of questions. There could be thousands of them. This will get you started. But they're all open-ended questions that if you're going into a difficult conversation, a difficult situation that you truly want to resolve in a positive manner, sit down and do a little planning before you go in. Select some questions. Script yourself a little bit, if you will, based on the situation that, as you know it, of some open-ended questions to go in and start drawing out the information. And you start there and continue with questions until you feel like you've drained this other person's knowledge of the situation to the point where, okay, I've got a clear understanding of where they're coming from. I understand their story clearly. That may be 3 questions. It may be 33 questions. It's all situational. There's no right number of questions. But the more you can get out of them and understand before you ever share, you want to hold your cards until they've shown you their cards. And always hold your view as simply a hypothesis. Maybe the reason, maybe the situation, or may not. That's your view. Hold on to that and then let it be formed as you get more information. And then be prepared for the paradigm shift. I cannot count, like I mentioned earlier, I cannot count how many times I've gone into situations and had a conversation with someone or a group of people where in the course of that conversation, my thoughts going into it were completely changed. I had a whole new perspective on things that I personally never would have come up with. I never would have thought of that on my own had I not started with their story. Also, back to what I've said multiple times now, and I know I'm repeating myself, had I not started with getting their story first and I'd gone in with my story first, I would have blown it. And that's often the reason why we don't have some of the conversations we know we need to have, because we just don't have the story, or we're not confident we have the story, or again, we're fearing a negative outcome. When you're getting negative outcomes with some of your conversations, I'm not going to accuse you of all of them, but some of your conversations, you're getting negative outcomes or a lack of change or a lack of a more positive direction because you're likely have been addressing it the wrong way. So be prepared for your paradigm shifts. That's the beauty of this. I love it when that happens because I know I just didn't step on my own 2 feet. I didn't hurt myself or that other person. I've just avoided a huge trap that many managers set for themselves in approaching these conversations the wrong way. So let me start wrapping this up a little bit. Here are the 4 steps. This is the gold standard for gaining mutual understanding. 1, have a curiosity mindset. Don't assume. 2, listen. Listen, probe, actively listen, ask them more questions, maybe make some notes. But do not comment. Do not play your cards until you've drained them of the appropriate amount of information. Side note, very often, once you've drained them of this information, if there's an emotional charge on their side, as you've allowed them to talk through their side first, you've drained their emotions so that by the time you're sharing your side of things, and in the end, agreeing on what's going to change, you've drained that emotion to the point where they're not going to respond to you emotionally. It's much less likely. It's almost like a jujitsu move. You hold your opponent down until they're drained of energy. That's what you're doing with listening to them. You're draining them of energy so they just don't have that spunk in them, that negative emotion in them. To make this a difficult conversation, you make it a very productive conversation. So actively listen, plenty of questions, then share your thoughts. Here's what I've heard. Here's what I think. This is what I've seen. Share your facts. And again, I'm going to revert back just 1 second. You only share your facts if the paradigm shift has not occurred, that you just see you have differing information. We need to get on the same page. Then you're going to share your facts. Then and only then. And in the end, the 4th step, and it's the most beneficial of all these steps, is you end with a collaboration. How are we going to fix this? How are we going to move forward in a more positive way? How are we going to create a win scenario? You win, I win, the customer wins, the team wins, the company wins, everybody wins when we walk out of this room with a positive sense of action that's going to result in a positive change, a positive outcome. So clear your mind. Be curious, ask a lot of questions, open-ended questions, get a lot of information, then share your side. So you're going to go second in all this, right? That's clear as the slide in front of you. And then we're going to talk about how we're going to fix this. Now, a couple tips on that. When I'm teaching folks how to properly performance manage somebody, either in a monthly, quarterly, annual review, a true performance management conversation is very similar to this, if not almost exactly the same in its architecture. But in the end, you always turn it back over to the person you're speaking with and say, okay, what do you want to do about this? What do you need to go work on? You don't tell them. You ask them, what are you going to go work on? What are you going to change? What are you going to do differently? What are you going to improve? What are you going to focus on so that we don't have this conversation again? And if they participated in this, and likely they will, with an open mind, because you've given them an open mind, they'll start laying out an action plan for you. Don't make the mistake of telling them what they need to do. Have them tell you what they're going to go do differently to improve things. Subtle but powerful. Because think about it in your own mind. Are you more likely to go do something that's your idea or what somebody else told you to do? Because in a command and control society, you can get compliance, you can get consensus for short periods of time, but you cannot achieve long-term positive change through compliance. They have to be bought into it. It has to be what they have agreed to do, not what you told them to do. Keep that in mind. And if you've ever had an employee where you've had a strong conversation with them and they've nodded their head, I'm going to go fix it, boss. And they've gone out and for 2 weeks or a month, they've sprinted and they've done everything that you told them to do to get you off their back. And then slowly they start resorting back to their old behaviors. And pretty soon, 90 days, 6 months later, the same situation is back and you're having to deal with it again. Yeah, and I'm sorry, I've got to be direct with everybody on this webinar today. Anybody's dealt with me before knows I'm a pretty direct guy. When your folks are struggling, it's your fault, not their fault. It's your responsibility to get them on track. The sooner you have these conversations, to course correct them in the ways, the methods that I shared with you today, the more likely they are long-term to be a very positive contributor to you and your business. There is no delaying these conversations. You have to address it ASAP. Now, little caveat to that, make sure it's a pattern. We don't want to be managing one-offs. But once you've seen it 2 or 3 times, you know it's a pattern. We need to talk to them about this pattern. You've got dates and times. You've got your details on it. You've got your story. You go get their story. You marry these stories. And then we walk out of there with, what are we going to do to improve this? And it works almost all the time. Because the goal, the purposes of this conversation is one, to get a better perspective, get to share your thoughts. You don't get your thoughts don't get left out of this. Don't worry. You get to share your thoughts. Most importantly, you get to talk about, you need to collaborate on how to move forward together. It's one of the lines that is very powerful at the end of one of these discussions is you say, in order for us to move forward, you've told me you're going to do this. Did I get that correct? In order for us to move forward, you've told me you've agreed to do this. That locks it in for you. You've said, hey, in order for us to continue working together, you're just going to have to do what you told me you're going to do. And then the beauty of that is, if it ever does not get addressed, and it doesn't always work, nothing I share with anybody is 100% successful. This improves the likelihood of success dramatically. But if you're going to move forward, they need to know you mean business. You're not going to tolerate things. You don't do that in a mean, mad mode. You do that in a professional, encouraging mode. But you do it with this structure, and the likelihood of success blossoms. Help partner with them to figure it out. Have them tell you what their game plan is, what their action plan is. And a bonus to all this, if you can get them to write out their own action plan as to what they're going to go do, there's something magic about putting action plans in writing that makes them very real. It gives a tangibility to them that improves the likelihood of adoption. One last little warning in this: until you practice this and got a really good poker face, watch your body language. As you're practicing, watch your eyes, watch your facial expressions, watch how you're leaning in and leaning out, how you're responding to things, because they're watching you. And your reaction to something is maybe and likely telling you you're not buying into what they're saying. Be careful of that, because you'll shut down the conversation. Watch your body language. You want to come out with a positive outcome. So in conclusion, the folks that have joined us today, you're here for a purpose. You wanted to learn how to have difficult conversations with better outcomes. I provided you a very small introduction to that. There's a lot more to this. Please download my book. Ashley will send you the link to it. There's more in there. If you want more conversation about that, I'm going to send you the link. Come talk to me. Talk to my partner, Eric. We'd love to talk you through a situation. We can role play together. That's free. We're not going to charge you for this, because practice is how we improve it. Any new habit, and this is forming a new habit because you're breaking the way you used to do things, it takes time and it takes practice, just like anything. Stop intentionally. Think about how to go into these conversations with curiosity. Prepare yourself ahead of time with some open-ended questions. And again, I've given you some starter ideas. And then listen. And that is probably, of all of this, the hardest part, because we sometimes go into these emotionally charged or rushing. We're all busy. We got things to do. I don't have time for this. If you don't make time for it and allow for this to come out in a positive direction, you're just going to be dealing with it again, likely. So be careful with that. Don't rush through these. Wrapping things up. When you display these behaviors, these negative behaviors, it removes your credibility. Avoid that, because that absence of credibility and trust limits your effectiveness when you're trying to correct a situation. And your results are going to be limited until you stop doing those things. And again, it takes time and it takes practice. And it becomes so much easier. And your peers, your direct reports, others around you will start gaining confidence in you. And it's all about respect. This bolsters the level of respect others have for you. Remember earlier in the conversation, the listening skill is the essential skill of all highly effective leaders. And we can learn to listen. Let me just tell you, I had to learn to listen. Part of this all comes from today is for me realizing I was approaching conversations with my direct reports in a very unproductive way. And I set upon my own self-improvement plan. And I did research and I practiced and I did some more research and I took training, I took courses and I got better and I practiced it more and I got better and better to the point where every conversation I had was looked forward to. Almost every conversation I had a very positive outcome. And I never hesitated to have them. I was brave. I was confident because I knew that when I had this conversation, it was going to be good. Although it may have the perception of being bad, even bad perceptions, everybody wants to do a better job. You're giving them the opportunity to perform at a higher level. Everybody leaves work every day and wants to go home and have had a good day. This allows them to have a good day every day. So here's what I'm going to do, because the crowd is a little sizable today. I'm going to, this is scheduled for another 30 minutes. I'm going to hang on at the end of this. And if anybody wants to ask some individual questions for me until 12:30, I'll be right here to field those questions for you. I'll get rid of the slides and we'll get everybody's pretty faces up on the screen. We'll talk about that. But please commit to your own personal development. This 1 hour you've spent with me learning something new, you're not going to know it in the next 10 minutes. Start small, start big, just start somewhere. Download the book, read the tools, and start practicing it. If anybody would like to reach out to me for more information, I'm also sending you all this information. I'm going to send you copies of the slides today that have all the links to my email, our website, please sign up for our newsletter. I have a podcast that's been around for about 6 years now. It's a top 100 podcast in the leadership and management category. I'm very proud of that. Lots of great listeners. Please sign up and start listening to the Business Mechanics Show. I love doing it. It comes out every Monday. And if anybody be interested in joining any further webinars, any future webinars next month in August, we're going to be having one of our most popular webinars. It is the most downloaded podcast that I've had over the years, with hundreds of thousands of downloads, is how to move from a manager to a leader. How do I be more effective to move from just being a manager to being an effective leader? If you're seeking to enhance your leadership skills to improve the impact you have on your organization, come join us. We've got a link in the notes for you to sign up for it. Love to have you again. There's a link to the invite. There's a link to the event. And I'm going to say goodbye and thank you all very much. Well, that's a wrap on another episode of the Business Mechanics Show. If today's content resonates with you, then you're going to love what we have to offer. For those of you who are ready to take your business or personal career to the next level, we have an array of training and coaching services tailored just for you. From performance coaching designed to enhance your potential, to executive coaching that guides leaders to steer their ships towards greater success. Are you in sales management or looking to fortify your leadership acumen? Dive into our sales management training and coaching. Not only will it sharpen your strategies, but it will also provide you an ROI that's undeniable. Remember, the best investment you can make is in yourself and your team. For those seeking flexible learning options, we're excited to share our online and in-person management leadership classes. These aren't just your typical courses. They are meticulously crafted, ensuring that they align with your unique needs and aspirations. And the best part, prices start at just $47 per month, making top-tier coaching and training accessible for everyone. Your growth, both personally and professionally, can have a ripple effect, the one I call the transformational triangle of change. The skills you learn, the perspectives you gain, and the efficiencies you create can translate into increased revenues, more cohesive teams, and an enriched company culture. So why wait? The potential ROI on this investment isn't just in dollars, it's in the progressive future you're carving out for yourself and your organization. Thanks once again for tuning in. And remember, every business needs a tune-up every now and then. Let the Business Mechanic Show be your guide. Check out our website, rdltraining.com, to discover more details on our programs and coaches. We have a link in the show notes to guide you there. Until next time, we're out of here.
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds.
Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous 2-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month.
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.